Hey, we have John Idan from the Yardbirds with us tonight, who is deep within Hasselhoff territory.
Welcome to the Three Beards podcast. My name's Craig, along with Austin and Chris.
Passed to a new generation of Americans born in this century.
Let me out.
I'm afraid that is quite then live to send the innocent to their death? Is this justice and honor in Massachusetts colony?
All right, welcome everybody. So at this time, we need to bring in Mark Eddy, man of the hour, who is he just bringing us some amazing talent, which is, I'm looking forward to this. I mean, everybody, John Idan from the Yardbirds, he is coming to us live. It's 1 a.m. in Germany. I mean, we can't even begin to thank him enough for, just staying awake. I'm not sure how much coffee he's got to have here, but welcome to the show.
Hello.
Sir.
Hello, my pleasure. Actually, I haven't had any coffee. It's been a long day, so I am a little,
So if your wife's handy, if you start to nod off, she could just like tap your foot or something like that, wake you up.
Back me with a bat or something. Yeah,
that's right.
And we're supposed to say happy birthday too, I think.
Yes, my birthday. Happy birthday to moi. Yes.
Hey, that's awesome.
It's been a lovely day as well. It's been a really great day.
Well, good. What a change. I mean, honestly, to go from Detroit, the U.S. to going over to Germany, what was the biggest for you? The biggest thing that took time getting used to being in Europe? Because, I mean, everything's different. I mean, everything from outlets to everything.
I mean, I moved from Detroit to London, and I lived in London the London area for 25 years. And then in the last 4 years of that, I'd met my wife when I was touring in Germany. And so we became an item, and we had a little boy in England. He was born there. And 10 years ago, we decided to move here to Germany because bringing up a little kid with no family, we were there all alone, and I was renting, I'd been renting this cottage for, I think it was one of the longest periods I'd stayed in one place. It was like 8 or 9 years I rented this. Funnily enough, the picture that you've got up is me standing against the cottage wall in England. It's a fantastic cottage I had. Anyway, but so being the biggest, it wasn't such a problem with England because of the language, was not such, is there. But there was always this kind of being American, and I'm not maybe not quite the stereotypical American that we might, there isn't really a stereotypical American, but at the same time, I was always slightly Anglified, my ancestry even goes that way. My mother is, I've been looking into my ancestry, and 10 generations before me, a guy named Reuben Bridges Nichols was born in Guildford, Surrey, which is where I used to live. And he's like my great, 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 great grandpa, you know?
Wow.
And he's a Virginian. He was one of the guys that came over on merchant ships. You know, he's a wealthy guy, had wanted to invest in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and he stayed there, and they just bred like rabbits. You know?
That's awesome.
That's where my mother comes from. You know,
Wow.
So, always kind of had a slightly Anglified upbringing. Yeah.
Now, you've always had, if please correct me if I'm wrong. It seems like you've always had like a drawing towards the blues side of music. Yeah. And then, you know, so after, I think if I got the date right, I think it was 88 that you took the holiday trip to London.
Yep.
And then that's, right. And so one of the things, like for the people that aren't familiar with that story, you know, if you wouldn't mind taking us back to what that moment was like, meeting Topham and Jim McCarty.
Well,
where it went from there.
Whole week I'd gone over to London with my girlfriend at the time, and I had been renting her mother's house. It's an odd story, but her mother lived in Amsterdam, so we went to London together, and the plan was to go to Paris and then on to Amsterdam and spend a week with her mother and then fly back. Well, it didn't quite go like that, and I ended up putting her on a ship to Paris. She actually I took her to Victoria Station, and she went down to the coast and got on a ship and went across the channel, and then we hooked up on the way back, and I stayed in London the whole time. So I was on my own in London. So I ended up going to Denmark Street and various places around Soho that I wanted to check out. And I was pretty lost. And I also owed the hotel not a lot of money, but I think I needed about 80 or 90 or 100 euro pounds more than I had in my traveler's checks. Right?
Oh.
The days of traveler's checks, you know.
Yes.
You know, calling home and having to put 25 pounds into the telephone, you know, just to call America. You know? Anyway.
Yeah, I remember those days.
Yeah, I remember doing that a few times. Anyway, so I had this guitar with me, and I took it down to Denmark Street to I went into Andy's guitar shop, and Andy's was one of many guitar stores on the street, very famous street. It's actually called London's Tin Pan Alley. All the old publishers were there. It's where Regent Sound was, where the Rolling Stones and the Kinks all recorded their first records. It was Music Row in London. So I walk into Andy's, and I just said to the guy called Dave Wilkinson, who was a bit of a known character around the music scene. And
oh no.
Uh-oh.
Hang on, he's coming back.
We'll get him back.
We
got you back.
You got me back?
We got you back. Yeah, it was like,
he's gone again.
Nope, we had him again. Yeah, it's like, it looks like the video's part's not working, but the audio is perfectly clear. So yeah,
okay.
just
I'll
keep
carry
talking.
on with the story for a minute.
Yeah, exactly.
So Dave instructs me to go upstairs. Now, this place is like a ramshackle full of guitars, and it's like a really old building, you know, super old building. And so I go up this ramshackle staircase, and I'm looking around with this guitar in my hand. And the guy introduces me to, he said, "Oh, Mr. Topham will see you about the guitar." So I showed him the guitar, and I was like, I know this name. It's got to be Topham, you know, the guy I'm talking to. So we started playing. They had many nice guitars. I picked up this Gibson 345 that they had. And I started playing, I think I was playing a Freddie King thing, and Top said, "You're playing Freddie King." I said, "Well, because that's what this guitar plays." It's like, this is a Freddie King guitar. So I'm still not with you, am I?
Nope. We can still hear your audio just fine. Yeah, that's
okay.
Yeah,
so
you'll just have to endure looking at us.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Top. Well, I didn't actually know his name was. He was introduced, I think, as Anthony, or Mr. Topham, and so we kind of hit it off and talked, and I settled on a price for this guitar. I sold him the guitar that I had. It was just a cheap Silvertone, thing, Sears guitar. Anyway, so I got my money from my hotel to pay my hotel off, and as we were walking down the steps, the telephone rang, and Mr. Wilkinson said, "Oh, Top telephone," because it was for Top, So I said, "It is Top Topham," So we got talking a little bit more, and I completed the deal. And he said, "Hey, you want to just go and have a cup of coffee together?" So we went down to the Anaconda, which was like a very famous coffee bar on that street. It was the place where people used to just carouse, and lots of people used to hang out there in the 60s, and it was still going. So we went and had a cup of coffee together. And he said, "What are you doing tomorrow afternoon?" I said, "Well, nothing really. I'm just here in London, So we got together and had lunch. And then he sort of sprung it on me. He said, "I've got a blues band with Jim McCarty, and we're looking for someone. Would you be interested in having dinner with Jim?" So I said, "Of course I would," Now, at that time, back in the 80s, even particularly maybe in Britain, but certainly in America, all during the 70s and the early 80s, the Yardbirds were very much a forgotten group. You heard them on oldies radio from time to time, but because of the success of Zeppelin and the whole heavy rock thing, and then the corporate rock thing that got sort of bashed down everyone's throats in the 80s, bands like the Yardbirds were like really a cult sort of thing,
Mm-hmm.
And I'd play that Yardbird 68. I remember playing, hey, you guys, you think Dazed and Confused, man? Well, you got to hear the Yardbirds do Dazed and Confused, man, because it's like way cooler, They're like, "What are you talking about?" I'm going, well, so basically, a guy's name like Top, Top was known on the scene, but you had to really kind of know who Top Topham was, because you'd have to have read the liner notes on only a very few bootleg or very rare Yardbirds albums to even know who he was. Put it to you that way.
What?
I'm still not on camera. This is perturbing.
I know. It's one of those things. Every now and then you get
there it is.
There
I am.
Yes.
Yeah. So
he does exist.
That whole thing that happened to me, I sometimes look back at it and I have to go, wow, because it changed my whole life. I went from being in a band in Detroit that played weekend gigs. We would do like 3-night weekend spots. We maybe had, if we were lucky to have 6 gigs a month, put it to you that way, We were a really good band, but there wasn't a lot of work, and we were young, we were still pretty young. But I was really itching to be doing a lot more. And all of a sudden I meet 2 of the guys from the band that really started me off as wanting to be a guitar player. So not that the Beatles didn't, not that the Stones didn't, but the Yardbirds were the band for lead guitar playing,
Well, yeah, I mean Eric
Yeah.
Clapton, Jimmy Page.
They're it.
Yeah.
They are the quintessential guitar band. There isn't another band. There's a lot of other bands with great guitar players, Hendrix and blah, blah, blah. But maybe John Mayall's Blues Breakers is the next band, that comes into that category. Fleetwood Mac to a degree, early Fleetwood Mac.
Mm-hmm.
But all of a sudden I'm like put into this situation where, one, they want to play with me, or they want me to play with them. I sent them over some demos of my group. They liked it. And by June of that year, it was early May, end of June, I took my first flight back, and I really didn't come back for 25 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, who's going to turn that down? You've got the one that inspired you, says, "Hey, would you like to play with us?"
Yeah, I was sort of
kind of busy this weekend.
Place at the right time, and I dare to say that I was the right guy, because
that's awesome.
I actually knew all of that shit. Like I was, in 70. Let's see, in 74. I was 10, right? And that's when I got my first Yardbird records and learning how to play that stuff. So I was like 10 years old learning how to play Yardbird songs.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of those bands, like you said, it's when you actually look back on it, it not only just the honor that you got being able to play with those guys, it's just the fact that you're walking in the footsteps of legends, you're able to recreate their songs, at the same time as creating your own stuff, like Birdlands. Mark's got that CD. And the first thing, I'll be honest, I didn't really know a whole lot of the music, but as I was listening to it, and then I listened to Birdlands, you guys actually captured I told Mark, it was almost like the soul of the Yardbirds in that album. I mean, it's like you didn't lose a sound. You kept it.
Well, we did do a lot of examination, because when we started cutting tracks for that, we'd already had a few original songs that the band had done in studios in London, Dream Within a Dream and Crying Out for Love. Those were already sort of in the can, as well as My Blind Life that we did with Jeff. Those were songs that we actually brought over, because the rest of it was recorded in Los Angeles. And when we started laying down, because we hadn't redone any of the old songs, this was the record company's idea. So we started to analyze, because they wanted everything to be concise, so that we could send backing tracks to the guest artists, So Jim and I flew to LA, and we started laying down bass guitar and drums, and rhythm guitars. I laid down a whole slew of guitars for the other lead guitarists to play along to, as well as backing or, like scratch vocal tracks. So there's a lot of work involved, but we started to listen to the songs, and we realized that we did need to play to a click track, to keep them nice and tight. But if you played those songs straight to, say 132, BPMs per minute, they sounded so dull and horrible because they just stayed on a beat, Whereas if you listen to the original track, the band is like progressively speeding up, maybe from 132, by the time it ends, they're at 138, mysteriously. Like you're going, wow, it's weaving around in time, Mm-hmm. Whereas kids nowadays, everything is so metronomic. It's like timed on like a quartz watch. It's nanosecond perfect, Yep. Bands didn't play like that back in the old days, The drummer clicked him in, and he might have been clicking him in at 134.7 BPMs per minute, like somewhere in between, there wasn't any, clock, nanosecond perfect clock. That's not music, you know?
Mm-mm.
And so to try to recreate that in the modern, with the modern tools, we literally had to go in and make tempo maps. We would make a tempo map to play to, so that, yeah, by the time the first chorus comes in, we have sped up 2 BPMs so that it starts to feel good, you know? And it slows down 1 BPM. We do tempo map all of those covers so that they don't just sound metronomic, you know? It sounds like a band, you know?
John, did you write Original Man for Birdland?
I helped write that. Yes.
Okay. So that was.
It's primarily I helped with the words, and I helped with the arrangements, of course. You know, we all worked on all the arrangements. Sometimes if a song had some things that needed tidying up, you know, somebody had a lyrical idea and we would chip in, or I would chip in. That's where you see, you know, my credit in the writing. But we always get an arrangement credit, you know. Everyone's involved in that.
We kind of show like the synchronicity, you know, real quick, Mark. He wanted to ask you about this song. I actually listened to your Birdland CD, and that was the one I selected as the one that I wanted to highlight to put on when I put the story to, you know, promote the show.
Oh,
so
cool.
I'd actually picked the same song, and so when he brought it up, it's like, yeah, I want to talk about an Original Man. I'm like, get out of here! That was the same exact song I picked. I go, what are the odds?
Well, that one's interesting as well. See, all of the songs that are originals on there, those are all recorded in the time-honored fashion of basically, okay, we know how we want it to start. We kind of know how we want it to sound. But the band is not playing with a banging click track in their head, you know? Mm-hmm. We're listening to one another. I remember Jim clicking us in on that particular thing, and Jim's drumming is really cool on that track. He does these great flams between the snare and the toms, and these great cymbal crashes. You know, Jim's very, very good with his cymbals. His cymbal is quite interesting. Anyway, but those were recorded at a place called Chiswick Reach Studios in West London, right on the banks of the River Thames. And I remember parking my car down there. There's this fantastic old houses down there, and the river comes up, right? And I had this little Renault Clio. It got friggin' flooded. I came in, the whole car was underwater, man. You know, it's like, oh my God, I left it down at the Thames. Yeah. But
you're lucky it's still there.
that was a hard song to write. I remember because I wasn't involved in. Jim and Chris had this idea to write a song about Keith, you know, because of course they, you know, he was such an integral part of their band, you know, he was the front man, you know, and I think for Jim in particular, just so sad that Keith was Jim's best friend, you know, they were best friends. And so when Keith died so haphazardly and just like, what? He's gone? Like, you know, it's just taken away from you, like a day going by, you know?
Yeah.
I think Jim was very, very devastated. And also that Keith was like, you know, Keith had many problems. He had health problems. He ended up having drinking problems. And he had other more serious problems came, you know, and he was always fighting them. And he would fix one, you know, and then another one would come along.
Wow.
But yet his talent was there. Like he had this, he was producing bands, he was producing Medicine Head, and he had Armageddon. He'd just come back from doing the Armageddon album. And of course, those guys were pretty heavyweight. You know, they were into things, you know.
Yep.
They were, you know, and that was the time for that sort of thing. And Keith unfortunately got himself involved with that. So to take this electrical shock that he got with ill health, probably addictions still, it killed him. It killed him like bang, you know. And he was like 34 years old, you know.
Yeah, that's yeah. I mean, that's got to be, you know, when you have like such a close friend, you know, pass on you. I mean, that's got to have a lasting
really
effect.
Talented, nice guy, you know, a guy who had, you know, anyone else would like look at it and go, he's got the whole world. I remember speaking with Bobby Caldwell who was in Armageddon, the drummer from Armageddon, and Captain Beyond, and he was like, Keith was so humble as a guy and sort of kind of like the non-pop star. And he's going, but man, don't you realize, man, like, you're the guy, like, you're friggin' Keith Relf, man. You're like, everybody's like, and Keith's just kind of like oblivious, you know, like, he's like, to me, he like, Bobby was saying he really had like not a low sense of esteem, but almost like no ego, you know, absolutely no ego.
And that's honestly rare in, you know, because I mean, there's just,
he was kind of like the frontman, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, kind of like, speaking of frontman too, you know, like with you, how do you find it easier, you know, with the acoustic guitar playing as opposed to bass guitar? So that's one of the things. Just like it's like a whole different thing, you know, because you're trying to keep a rhythm at the same time, singing at a completely different pace. That's what that's a talent.
When I played bass in the band, because I'm playing second guitar now, or playing dual guitar with. It's a lot easier to play guitar, you know. The bass parts were, you know, to try to walk a bass line against your voice doing the counterpoint is very, 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 very tricky. Whereas a lot of the, you know, tunes like Train Kept a Rollin' or I'm Not Talking, basically the bass is playing the same part the guitar is, you know. It's it's just doubled, you know. He's the foundation. But I'm glad not to be playing bass anymore because it never was my instrument. I got saddled with it much the same way as Paul McCartney did in the Beatles, you know. They all played guitar, and they needed somebody to play bass, so Paul said, "Oh, I'll do it," you know.
And you guys, yeah.
It happened like that. Even Paul Samwell Smith, that he was a guitar player, and he sort of rose to the challenge of becoming the Yardbirds bassist. And boy, you know, people don't think about his bass playing, man, but it's friggin' colossal. You know,
yeah,
it's colossal. I mean, the guy is like, you know,
yeah, it's impressive. Like I said, looking at I mean, not only just the vocals, you know, you got guitar, bass, drums, organ. I mean, the only thing that I didn't see, the only thing I didn't see is that you don't have anything to your credit in the horn section. So I'm not sure.
Well,
you know,
I'm working on that. I've got a new song that needs some horns, and I was thinking about trying to get a saxophone to see if I could eke out the lines I want.
There you go.
I mean, they wouldn't be very professionally played, but as long as they're in tune.
I don't doubt it. I mean, just looking at I feel bad. I mean, I feel like my bass guitar over there is gaining dust. You know, it's like I try to play what I can, and I'm looking at your thing, and I'm just like, God, I'm lazy. I am so lazy.
Well, I'm being a multi-instrumentalist is a little bit of a because I'm still doing it. You know, I'm recording more songs now and looking forward to doing a new album, finishing this new album this year. But
come back and we'll help you to promote it.
Oh, it'd be great.
Just let us know.
But I do have to look at each instrument as a discipline. Like over the summer, this time last year, I bought a chromatic harmonica, like Stevie Wonder plays, and where it can play any melody in any key. And so I got this really lovely Hohner harmonica, and my son's got football every Tuesday and Thursday, or he did. So I'd take him to football, and I'd sit in the car and learn how to play like Brian Hyland's. So we got to say goodbye for the summer. Sealed with a Kiss. I'm sitting in the car trying to play, or theme from Midnight Cowboy, that sort of harmonica playing. So I'd sit in the car, and I'm actually getting pretty good at it. It's but you do have to dedicate the time, So I play bass, and I play some. If I'm working on a bass part, I sit down and play bass and play to get my shit together.
Yeah.
So,
No, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I just had a comment before you kind of get into the question, but maybe one of my only contributions tonight is saying, "Hey, that's
hey,
one of the."
He's our Flavor Flav.
What John? The first time I met John, that was what he was recommending to the Pittsburgh Blues Fest audience for audience participation. For the next song they were doing. So I remember that 10, 12 years ago, and
I remember that gig.
The
Pittsburgh Blues Festival with John Mayall's Blues Breakers were on that night.
Yeah, and Kim Simmons and Savoy Brown. But see, they're right there. Oh,
that's right.
Other side, right there. There's your and Jim and Chris, the original. But it was a memorable evening, and then you went into over, under, sideways, down. But that's one of those songs that has an Eastern type music feel to it, and what we were talking about right before we went live is Jimmy would carry that on through all the Led Zeppelins. Was it the Bombay Orchestra stuff that they did, the unleaded, Kashmir. It's really interesting that. I think Jeff originally did it, but Jimmy was doing it too. They were good friends, anyways. But that's one of those over, under, sideways, down. It seems to be like one of those songs that just became a blueprint for so many other.
When you diagnose what they were up to, they basically, that tune was their take on Rock Around the Clock, right?
Oh, okay.
As far as a rhythm, like we're going to do a swing, rock around the clock type of thing. But that's so square in 1966. So what can we do with it? So they come up with the little Snake Charmer intro, the weird little bit with the bells in the middle in the minor section, the When Will It End, with lots of plate reverb, and like a little bit of a freak out, and then
it's a fascinating song.
It's just like, you can't help but hear that. All the Yardbirds stuff has a very unique charm to it that's not like any other band. They don't sound like any other band. And a lot of their stuff is not recorded so well. It's like it was primitive 3 or 4 track recording at the very most, and with engineers that had never recorded loud guitars before, where that sort of stuff was forbidden in studios. The Beatles talk about it a lot, you can't, there's certain things that EMI just wouldn't allow you to do, So for lesser bands like the Yardbirds to experiment was very difficult in those days. Eric Clapton, when he recorded the John Mayall's Blues Breakers album, the engineers were just freaking out as to what to do with this 50-watt Marshall that Eric insists has got to be on 10 in order to get his sound. They're going, we just don't know how to record that, man. And to be honest with you, the union says that if we say that we don't want to record it, you don't get to play today. Sort of. It was like jobs for the boys back in the old days. It was all union shit. Everybody was like on a pay schedule, and everything was very defined, and you didn't break rules. And if you did, it was like, whoa, so it was very daring at the time. It's like having long hair back in those days. Yeah.
Where do you kind of expand on what you were just talking about with where do you think the state of music would be if you had today's technology, all the availability of doing it yourself, but you took it back to that period with that talent? I mean, what kind of music would they have been able to produce?
Well, I'm glad that that's just not possible.
Yeah.
I hate to sort of pour water on that idea.
No,
but I think so much of the beauty of the music that happened in that time, and I think time will bear this out, that we did go through in the 40s, 50s, and 60s and 70s a major cultural revolution on so many fronts, and music was such a open door for that sort of expansion. If you just think about all the music that was being created, jazz and blues and the rock music that came, and just the openness of that, and the experimentation that it took through all the different barriers, be it the technological barriers that were overcome or mastered, shall you say. Like if you go and listen to Both Ends Burning by Roxy Music as a piece of hi-fi, high fidelity, recorded about 75. Man, Chris Thomas recorded that for Roxy Music. He recorded Badfinger. He recorded Elton John. It is sonically awesome. It is just like what a great recording. It's like Dark Side of the Moon, or Led Zeppelin 2. The advancement of technology, analog technology, had gotten to such a point of perfection that you wonder why they did replace it. Well, the conveniency of the new CDs, the digital formatting of that, Sony developing the digital tape recorder and forcing that technology on their artists. Neil Young recorded which album? The one with
Harvest?
Keep on Rocking in the Free World.
Oh.
That was recorded on digital tape. It was one of the first albums to be recorded multi-track digital on digital tape. And they forced that on him, and he really was rebelled because he didn't like the clarity. He thought it was too garish. Of course, he'd been recording on, the top flight analog equipment all through the 70s, and they were perfecting that sound. And so when I quoted the Roxy Music thing, if you were to compare that sonics of a great 70s recording compared to 1961, or 1955, but Buddy Holly records sound really good. There's a lot of great sounding records from the 50s and the 60s.
Oh yeah.
The 70s, man, they had analog sounding so sweet that, without all those advancements, the digital technology wouldn't have come about.
There's something. It's like my son. I told him, it's like every now I've got a record player. I wish I had the larger speakers so you can really experience it. But when I put those on, I'm like, I'm like, it's the same song. No, there is a huge difference between an MP3 on the computer and listening to this pressing. I mean, listen. Oh, I mean, growing up, I had a friend who had those. I just called them like these towers. I mean, they were the 8 foot, it looked like 7 or 8 foot tall things in the corners. Yeah. He'd put on an album, and it's like the whole room would just move, with the sound. And it just going back, it gives you that whole different experience for music.
Well, music was also, like Who's Next, man. I mean, it's like you put Who's Next on through a good system and crank it up, man. And the band are there in your living room, man, and it's, and it is a ride, it's a journey. These bands were putting out these records, and the producers and the engineers, I know a few of these guys that were involved in the making of those albums, and they were putting themselves to the test and their own reputations. They're on the line. It's like Glenn Johns, man. He's like, I'm going to make an album that is going to be so sonically far out, and perfect, or like so all-consuming that it's just going to be undeniable, So there it is. Who's next?
Yeah.
It's like, that's like his reputation as much as the band's.
That's one of the greatest.
I'm going to record these drums like drums have never been recorded before. So that's all those guys all had ambition. There were walls to break down.
Yeah, John. And speaking of recordings, I told you, when we're talking about getting this show set up, I'm saying, okay, hey, I have my own copy of the Yardbirds '68 CD. I don't know what adjective to use to describe describe the CD. Just get it. But you said there's you can check on YouTube where there's a the Yardbirds playing at the Fillmore West in '67.
Yes, I've heard that.
And I listened to that. Okay, it's one of about the only known recordings of glimpses. I mean, that one's really fantastic too. Are there any of these just recently discovered archival?
I came across one just about 2 weeks ago. I think it was from Concord, New York, or Concord, Connecticut, from 68. It might have been on that same tour. From the
Wow.
the 68, the Anderson Theater gig, which
Mm-hmm.
is basically the Yardbirds 68 gig.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And of course it's the same set list, and it's much the same as far as the kind of, they put on a good performance. I think the band come 68, one of the things that Jim always talks about was that because they knew it was over, the band basically, Jim and Keith had said, we're going to part ways at the end of the tour. There was nothing more to do than just ride it out and have fun and play as well as you could under the circumstances, because back in those days, the circumstances changed just as much as they do now. But it was harder then to be consistent. You didn't know whether or not you're going to have a good PA. You didn't know what the sound guy was going to be like. You might have rented equipment that comes in, so on and so on. Was the journey too long? And they're traveling by all kinds of weird, different ways. It was much harder to do everything back in the old days. Anyway, but they actually had fun on that tour, and they made money for the first time. Peter Grant became their manager, and Peter could tell the story better than anyone, but and I think he does somewhere. You can see it. Guy says Peter goes in to collect $1,000 from a guy in some little hut after the band have done their gig, and the guy puts a revolver on the table, and he says, "What?" And it's Peter Grant, sort of voice like this. Says, picks up the gun, and he says, "You're gonna fucking kill me over $1,000? Don't be so fucking cheap." And I think he proceeded to just pick the guy up, take the $1,000, and just walked out of the place. So that was the sort of thing that they had to be up against. But they actually made serious money, whereas they never made money on tours before. So the band kind of, and I'll tell you what is interesting about that 68 album, and I've spoken to Jim about this, is the record company had still an album due. There was still one more album due to Epic. And so they were going to get it by hook or by crook, because they knew the band was going to break up. So they went, they put the band in the studio at CBS Studios in New York for 2 or 3 days. And they put him in with the producers or the engineers who'd engineered Sound of Silence for Simon and Garfunkel. Like this.
Wow.
Yeah. So they've got the Yardbirds with Jimmy Page, fuzz boxes, Marshall amps, the whole bit, with the guys who are used to engineering the Sound of Silence for Simon and Garfunkel. Anyway, so, and then they also said, well, we're going to record a gig, maybe a couple of gigs. So they recorded the Anderson Theater. What did they do? They brought in a Grundig 3-track tape recorder that ran at 3 3/4 inches per second. This much tape in a second.
Yeah.
Standard professional Studer tape back in the old, even at that time, was 15 inches per second on a 1-inch piece of tape. That was what you recorded professionally on. They recorded the Yardbirds live on basically the machine that they used to bring into our school classes.
Yep.
The little tape recorder that used to come in on the metal table, right? That's what they recorded the Yardbird gig on.
God.
Anyway, so they put them in the studio for 3 days, and they recorded, I think, 6 songs, right?
Wow.
And they recorded, if you listen to the 68 album, it's very revealing. Avron Knows is friggin' unbelievable as a tune. It's kind of like Eddie Cochran did some LSD, and and it's basically the same thing as in concept as communication breakdown. It's the same in the same idea of making a new song. And then there's a tune called "Knowing That I'm Losing You," which they didn't put out with the vocal, which is on that particular album, but it's Tangerine. On the Zeppelin 3 album, it's the exact same song, which I think Jimmy had written for What the World Needs Now, his girlfriend. Oh, I can't think of her name right now. Anyway, there's a lot of interesting music. So I asked Jim, I said, well, if you guys were going to break up, why were you so wanting to write songs, and why is this stuff, why did you even pursue it, And he said, well, because we still wanted to be as good as we could be, It didn't come out, but they were still striving to be not just a bunch of washed up guys, who are on their last legs, So the material is all demo-like, it's not finished, but the song quality, had they actually put it out and Zeppelin had not happened, and they'd done Dazed and Confused and so on on the album, the next Yardbirds album would have put them into a whole new category of band. And even though that wasn't to be, had it happened, the Yardbirds would have gone into the 70s much the same way Pink Floyd did, or Deep Purple from the 60s into the 70s. The Yardbirds could have done a very similar thing to Deep Purple or Pink Floyd.
Now, one of our listeners, Harlan, is the girlfriend Jackie DeShannon?
Yeah, Jackie DeShannon. That's who I'm thinking of. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good job, Harlan. Good job.
That's right. She's a great singer. What a great singer, and a great songwriter,
Looking at those, kind of getting this too, it was amazing to me how everybody just kind of parted with their separate ways, and here's Jimmy Page just left holding the keys, like, okay, now what do I do? You're stuck, and I'm like,
he knew exactly what he wanted to do, because he'd already test ran the whole thing through America, and he knew what those kids. I mean, I grew up in Detroit, and they played the Grandy Ballroom, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know all kinds of people who saw them at the Grandy, and when they came back, Zeppelin played the Grandy, and people were like, yeah, this is kind of what we were thinking Jimmy would be doing, kind of like the Yardbirds Mark II, like heavier, more in your face. And, I mean, hats off to them. I mean, I love the Zeppelin, and I think Jimmy did a great thing, no question about it.
Yeah, and John, with the legacy that the Yardbirds left, and you said they were a kind of like a cult band, by the 80s, but the name of the band was able to attract legendary people and people who would go on to solidify their reputations by being on Birdland, and you were. How were you able to easily attract big name people like Skunk Baxter, Joe Satriani, Steve Vai, Slash. You know, Brian May was already a
No,
huge name.
it was the record company's idea, right? I mean, none of us really wanted to, it was normal for us to go out and play. We were the touring Yardbirds. But our ambition as that band with Jim and Chris at the sort of the leadership was to become the Yardbirds, and record an album. So that's what we were. We'd written songs, and we had Crying Out for Love. As I said, we had a lot of things already in the can, So we're shopping around, and the record company that bit was Favored Nations, which was owned by Steve Vai and I should remember his name. Anyway, guy who owned Guitar Center, originally invented Guitar Center. So Steve, of course, had his own fame and his own connections. So he said, "How would you guys feel about doing a half and half album where you do covers of your old material? We have special guests." And we were kind of like, that's not what we really want to do, but we'll have a go. We've got Jeff on one of our new tracks, so that's cool. So as I said, we put together the backing tracks, and gradually the artists came in, the other guitarists came in, and some of them were from our instigation, and some of them were from Steve, because of course Satriani and Steve Vai are like very, very close friends, as is Steve Lukather. And meeting those guys was very interesting. And how much, we had people, once the word got out that was what was going to happen, we had 20 guitar players that wanted to do it, that were, knocking on doors, our door, to come and play on the record. Well, can I have a track? Can I have a track? And because the Yardbirds are that band, they are the guitar players' band. And
yeah, that's great.
Even back in the '60s, Eric Clapton, he can bitch about the band all he wants, but at that time they were a good, solid rhythm and blues band, and he cut his teeth learning how to play live rhythm and blues with a bunch of other young white boy Surrey boys who wanted to do the same thing, Mm-hmm. He eventually outgrew that, or he grew in a different direction. He doesn't have to bitch and moan about it. Jeff Beck is technically like the best guitar player the band has ever had, or inventively wise, Jeff is a genius. To this day, he's 70 odd years old and he can still play the shit out of his guitar, I'm
awesome.
I'm not really sure Jimmy Page can, he gets old, you get older. I don't know if his hands can do what they do, but Jeff's hands can still do it, Anyway, so they all kind of move and groove around, but every guitar player, I'll tell you a little story. We played Austin, Texas. We played at the South by Southwest. And on the stage with us that night was Billy Bob Thornton and Richie Havens. And Richie Havens, of course, had done many gigs with the Yardbirds back in the 60s at all of the ballrooms and different clubs. And Richie was like, "Oh man, I'm playing with the Yardbirds again, gonna see my old friends, Anyway, so we do this gig, and Richie was like meeting Jesus, It was a pretty incredible guy. Anyway, not to demean Jesus, but not to put Jesus into a humanly form like a normal man, but Richie's a pretty elevated cat,
Oh yeah.
So anyway, we do the gig and we've got guests that night, right? The record company has shipped out Jeff Baxter, Steve Vai is there, and Slash is with us, right? And I'm gradually introducing the audience to our next guest, right? So Skunk comes out and plays great. Everybody knows Skunk, you know, so like they all cheer their asses off, you know. And then I said, well, you know, a couple of tunes later, you know, I said, I got to bring out another friend of ours and let me introduce you to Slash. Like the whole place just like freaks out. It's like 5,000 people all just completely like going berserk, you know. Like this,
oh my God.
I'm standing there playing, and there's like Slash with the whole hat and the whole bit, you know, like he's right in front of me. Like there's his like hat and he's got his legs spread apart and he's like playing the solo on over, under, sideways, down, like, you know, to the audience, the whole rock god thing. I'm like going like, I'm hallucinating, you know? And, or he might've been the last one. Because I remember introducing Steve Vai and the whole place going, and I said, by the time I got to the third one, it was like I said, oh, this is really getting quite ridiculous now.
Man.
Like, it's getting beyond stupid, you know. And then they all played. Then we had a big jam and we did Smokestack Lightning, and it was very revealing them playing Smokestack Lightning unrehearsed. Because none of them were very good at it. they all knew their shit for their own tune that they'd actually worked on. You know, like this, like Steve Vai playing, you know, Shapes of Things. You know, he wrote a great solo for it. Wonderful solo Steve Vai plays, and he played it like perfect, you know, like it was like, you know, like, but get him to play like Smokestack Lightning, who's like a fucking little white boy. Like, I hate to say it, it was like so white and lame, you know. It's like I was like, oh God, you know, like you guys don't know how to groove, do you?
That is awesome. Yeah, that's one of those. That's a fantastic story.
They're not blues players, man. You know, no disrespect to them, but that's not their game. You know, they're not off the cuff blues players.
It's still a wonderful CD. I highly recommend that one as well. And yeah, it's a fascinating project where you put to music an Edgar Allan Poe poem.
Yeah. Well, that was Jim had put that song down with a kind of a new agey type of thing that he had called Pilgrim, which he had a girl singer and Tanya, I can't remember Tanya's last name, but he had a lot of strings. He had a string quartet, and the string quartet was conducted by, I should remember this guy's name because he's quite famous as well. He'd done the, I'm losing it. I'm losing names now.
It's 2 a.m.
Yeah. Anyway, I'd have to rewind the tape. I had it a second ago. Anyway, he'd done this track. And I did a live performance of it with Jim, and I rehearsed and played acoustic guitar for him at that time. And I just thought it was great. So we were at Chiswick Reach Studio, the studio where my car drowned, and we just recorded, I think, Original Man that day. And I said to him, okay, guys, 3 chords, E minor, C, A minor. And I looked at Jim and I said, play us the For Your Love beat, you know, give us For Your Love on the drums, you know? And we played those 3 chords over the top of that, which are not that dissimilar to the For Your Love chords, you know, 1 chord different. And Jim knew what song I was having us play. We were playing Dream Within a Dream, because we'd played it 2 nights before at this other gig. I said, we're going to cut this tomorrow. So it was actually my idea to like take Dream Within a Dream from his experimental project into the Yardbirds. And I thought it was like just perfect for us, you know. So
wow.
I really, really like that track. I really like that track.
I do too.
Yeah.
very interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting project, and you're working on new projects. Please let us know.
Oh yeah,
when
I will.
when that's done. And what do you think about touring this year? Maybe. Do you think it'll be out and about touring, or is that maybe put off to 2022? What?
I really kind of hope not. I hope that we can get something together by the end of the year. I hope.
Yeah, hopefully.
I mean, it really doesn't rest with us. I think if there were contracts and we were due to play at the end of the year and everything was solidified, we'll be there. It's really down to powers kind of to do with promoters and the restrictions that they're under, and the agents and the ability to draw up contracts, because they can't really draw up contracts if they're built on sand. You can't build a house if it's
it is
right.
Yeah, is there? I think you do wonderful performances as the Yardbirds. When you're at outdoor concert or indoor venue, but are there any plans for the Yardbirds to do anything in the studio as well, on top of your project?
Yeah, no, we've been talking about it. I think once we butt heads, once we actually can physically be in each other's company, I think that there'll be something recorded.
Awesome.
I've got some stuff and that could be right. Everyone's kind of wants to bring something to the table. But it is very tricky. You don't just, it's like doing Birdland was very, very hard to come up with material that you felt strong enough about that would fall, that would sort of continue the legacy of the group, because it is such a difficult genre to actually emulate, to continue, the band also, that long period of nothing happening, of course, and Jimmy taking the kind of concepts that he did into Zeppelin. This is kind of what I'm talking about. If Jimmy had taken those same concepts in with Jim and Keith and Chris, and they kind of had continued to move forward, they would have been much like a Pink Floyd, everybody putting this thing in. The stuff, Armageddon and all of that I was talking about earlier, that's pretty heavy experimental music, man. I mean, so
Yeah.
They would have been pretty heavy, pretty out there. And to come up with material that fits is not easy, It's
Wow.
not easy.
Well, hey, man, it is. Like I said, we need to let you get back to your family. It is 2 a.m. over there.
Yeah.
As I'm looking at the clock, I'm like, oh, we already hit an hour. I'm like,
That's
oh my
funny.
god.
I could probably talk for another hour, but because
Yeah. But everybody, go to John.
On the subject, it's a gas, it's a
Yeah.
it is very cool.
It's
Cool.
fantastic. I mean, just talking to you about, your history, the history of the Yardbirds. You can go to johnidan.net. Get more information. I went there and it was still in German, so I may have signed up for organ donorship. I'm not sure. Yeah, it was.
too.
It was.
You should find it in English. It should be there.
It said that there, but what it was like, what it was the cookies thing, like everything was in German. So I think I may have signed up for. I might be getting a magazine. I don't know what I signed up for.
No, they want your kidneys and your gallbladder.
Yeah. Or you go to the Yardbirds.com
and any brain cells that might happen to be going spare.
Exactly. Oh, but John,
Gentlemen,
thank you so much.
Yeah, come back. We didn't even get to Box of Frogs. So
No.
Gosh, no.
Yeah,
No, we got more. Yeah.
So when you get the CD done, let us know. And
Yeah.
we'll
I've
talk
actually
about
got
that.
a lot of really. I've been on a streak lately. I've got written in the last 3 months. I've got about 6 new, really quite good songs. I'm very pleased, and I've also got a backlog of stuff as well. So a new album I think is going to be a must in this new year for me, and I think the material is going to be really good. I'm very
Awesome.
very pleased. You know,
That's an awesome tease. Well, sir, tell the family thank you so much for
thanks
sacrificing time with you. Yeah. Oh,
real
God.
pleasure to see you all. You know?
Yeah, it was
well.
truly our honor having you on, sir. Thank you
Stay
very
safe,
much.
We'll
stay
be in
healthy.
touch.
All right. Okay.
All right. Have a great night.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Bye.
All right. God bless you.
Thanks.
Yep.
All right, everybody. It's John Idan from the Yardbirds. Amazing interview. Absolutely love that. Everybody, want to thank our sponsor, Nanny Cakes. Go to Nanny Cakes 407 on Facebook or give her a call in the Central Florida area, 407-923-2898. Mention us and the beardless one, and she might save you 15% on your cake order. So it's always go to threebeardspodcast.com and check us out there. Patreon.com/threebeardspodcast. So you could be a beardo like us. We are rebroadcast at 10 p.m. on Thursday nights through the Patriot Radio station on the Zeno Radio app. Download that, courtesy of JJ Beard Co. Go to there, jjbeardco.com. Check them out. Thank them for putting us on there. Everybody, thanks for watching. Appreciate it. Go to johniden.net. Sign up for something in German. I'm not sure what it was, but you'll sign up for it and you'll get some crazy information plus a bonus gift maybe.
Yes.
Yeah. And then the yardbirds.com. Exactly. Go to the yardbirds.com and get to have information on tours, upcoming information with the band itself. Everybody, they said appreciate it. You can also look them up on Facebook. You have the John Idan group. That's right there. That's their page. You can follow him as well for more information. So everybody, thanks for watching. John, appreciate it. Have a great night, and we will see everybody later on. Good night.
Cheers, man. Yeah.